Hey guys, welcome to your fourth Java tutorial. Today we're going to be learning about loops. So what is a loop? A loop is basically a way to repeat a chunk of code a certain number of times without having to write it again and again. So for example, let's say the goal of this program is to print out hello world 4 times. One way to go about it is to just copy paste it and print this line 4 times. If we run it, it gives us whatever we wanted, right? But what if we wanted to print it out 10 times or 100 times, right? It's really inefficient to just copy paste this, right? Because if you do it 100 times, who knows how long it'll be. So the solution to this is to use a loop. So the first kind of loop is a while loop. So what is a while loop? A while loop will basically repeat a chunk of code while a condition is true. So like we talked about in the last lesson with if statements and booleans, right? A condition, so like 3 is less than 6, right? Or we can have a variable, so like counter is less than 5, right? This will either give you true or false. And so if whatever this condition is evaluates to true, we're going to do whatever is inside of the code, inside of the brackets. So let me just show you. So in order to create a while loop, first you have to type out while, then you do parentheses, and inside the parentheses will be whatever condition you want, right? So true, false, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a counter variable because we want it to do a certain number of times. So let's say int counter equals 1. So we just created an integer variable. And now we're going to say while counter is less than or equal to 4, right? And then we're going to do these curly braces, and inside we can write our code. So let's just say system dot out dot println, and we're going to say counter. So let's take a look at what happens here. So we have an integer, and it's going to be equal to 1 whenever we start. Then we have a while loop, and the condition is going to be while counter is less than or equal to 4. So let's check it. So is 1 less than or equal to 4? Yes. So it's going to print out counter. And now we're going to go back here. And one thing I forgot was we need to change counter every time. Otherwise, 1 will always be less than 4, and it'll keep repeating this forever and on and on and on. And it'll give you an infinite loop, which could sometimes crash your computer. So let's do counter equals counter plus 1. So what this does is it'll increase counter by 1, right? So we run it the second time, counter is going to be equal to 2 because we set counter equals to itself plus 1. All right, then the third time is going to be 3, the fourth time is going to be 4, and then the last time, counter is going to be equal to 5. So is 5 less than or equal to 4? No. So it's going to evaluate to false, and it won't execute this code. So if you run this, it should do it a total of 4 times, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Before we move on, one thing about Java is this line here, there's a couple of different ways to write it. So one way is like this, but to make it faster, you can do counter plus equals 1. So what this means is it's going to add whatever number this is to whatever it was before. So if we put 2, for example, whenever we do this, counter would start off equaling 1, then the second time it would equal 3. If we were to run it again, it would equal 5, right? You can do it with a bunch of different numbers. Another way to do it is you can do counter plus plus. And what plus plus means is it's going to increment it by 1 every time. So this is exactly like what we had before, but it's much simpler to write that than saying counter equals counter plus 1. Right, so let's just go back and we're going to use increment. And now let's just say we wanted to do what we did earlier. So hello world, run it. Great, we were able to get hello world to print out 4 times. And if we wanted to print out more, let's say 10 times, we just change counter is less than or equal to 10. So it'll keep running it until counter is equal to 10, or greater than 10, sorry. Right, and we got it to print out 10. If you wanted to print it out 100 times, right, same way. But we're not going to run that. So there's another way to get it to do this, and it's a different kind of loop called a for loop. And it runs in a kind of similar way. So let's just go ahead and show you. So for, and it's going to take in 3 things. It's going to take in the starting number, the ending number, and how much to increment it by each time. So let me just show you. The first parameter to put in is going to be an integer, the starting number. So let's say int I equals 1. Let's start it at 1. Now we're going to put in when do we want it to stop. So let's say I is less than or equal to 4, like earlier. And the last one is going to be how much is I going to change each time. So if we want it to go up by 1, just like earlier, we're going to do I plus plus. And then we're going to do curly braces. And then whatever code is inside of these curly braces is going to be run repeatedly. Right? So let's just say system.out.println I. Alright, so let's break this down and see what it does. So the first thing we did was we created a new integer called I, and this was kind of like counter in our earlier example with while. So I is going to start out equaling to 1. Then each time we run it, we're going to check if I is less than 4. So this was like the while loop, right? It's going to check a condition. If it's false, then it won't run it. But if it's true, it'll run it and keep going on. And then what I++ does is each time we run it, I is going to increase by 1. So let's just run it and see what happens. We got 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So the first time I was equal to 1, so we printed out 1. The second time I increased by 1, so I became 2. And now we printed it out and it was 2. So on and so forth until I was equal to 4, right? 4 is still less than or equal to 4, so we printed out 4, and then it became 5. So once I was not less than or equal to 4, then we exited the loop and we didn't execute this code, right? So same like earlier, we can do hello world, right? And we can get it to print out 4 times. Something else we can do, right? So let's just go back to printing out I. We can change the starting and stopping numbers. So let's just say we want it to start off at 5 and we want it to end at, let's just say 12, right? So let's go ahead and run it, and we can see that the first number that I was 5, and the last number that it was 12, and between each number it increased by 1. So that is basically while loops and for loops, right? So I encourage you guys to go ahead and mess around, right? See what kind of code you can make easier by using a loop to repeat it rather than typing it out by hand.